Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko. I'm a former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur, and I'm the founder of an immigration tech startup called Laborless, which automates H-1B compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency for immigration and global mobility, and of course, which brings you this show. I'm very excited for today's guest because we have one of these other like super cool non-traditional immigration tech entrepreneurs who has an incredible story, who is also an immigrant herself, like me and like so many other guests on this show. Our guest today is Yesica Sierra, who is the founder of Tila. So Tila is kind of two parts. It's a company that provides immigration paralegal work. So basically, they support immigration lawyers and teams with work. So if you're a lawyer and you have a ton of work and you can't hire, don't want to hire a full-time paralegal, you work with Tila and they do all of the case preparation for you as if you had a team of paralegals with you. And Tila is also a tech product. They have built an in-house proprietary kind of case management system for their clients. And so we're going to learn all about how Yesica came up with the idea for Tila and built it out and implemented it. And then also, of course, about Yesica's life and how she came to the U.S. And all that good stuff. So without any further introduction, Yesica, thank you so much for being here. And I'm super looking forward to our conversation.
Hi, Roman. Thank you. Yes, let's get started.
So for anybody who is watching live, we're a few minutes late. The best thing about live streaming is that you can never foresee technical difficulties. And I think it's most ironic on a show about technology because, we're supposed to be the tech people, but sometimes you just can't control the internet. So for anybody who's watching live, hopefully this should be all right. But if for some reason anything goes out, please bear with me. And Yesica, you're not your fault. It's always my fault here. So Yesica, I know the other day we were chatting in preparation for this call, and you started like telling me a whole bunch of stuff about your life story, and I was like, oh, wait, don't tell me now. Let's wait, because I was like engrossed. So we're obviously going to get into your journey and into sort of how you came up with this idea for Tila and how you've kind of fell into being an entrepreneur in this immigration industry. Before we do that, just wanted to say for folks watching or live, wherever you are, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube world, drop a comment below. Let us know who you are and where you're watching or calling in from. We've got Evelyn Vasquez. Hi, Evelyn. It was nice to meet you today, and
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. And Elena from Maryland. I'm really looking forward to this as well. Thank you, Elena, always for your support and for watching the show. And anybody else who's out there, drop a comment, shout yourself out and where you work, what you do. And then, of course, throughout the conversation, please ask questions, especially of Yesica. You've seen enough of me. I'm boring. But Yesica, people want to know everything about you. So, okay, so you, just to go from the beginning, you came to the U.S. from Mexico when you were young. Can you talk about that story? Because I want to preface it by saying that, and I mean, this is because you've talked about it, obviously, but you were a Daca recipient, which is fascinating for me because even though I've worked in immigration for so long, I worked on a few Daca cases back when I was practicing, when it was just being the first time around, they were revamped or extending it, and you had to file like that extension. It was like, it was, I don't know what to do. There were kind of very basic rules, but there wasn't a lot. It was really kind of a crazy time from that perspective. But I've never had a chance actually to talk to anybody who was the recipient of Daca and to learn about sort of like, how does, you hear about it, it's all over the news. How does that happen? So I'm really excited and, thankful that you're here to sort of share that story. So you came to the U.S. when you were how old? You were 6 years?
Yes, I was about 6 years old when my parents, my sister and I moved to the US, and we entered with a visa and eventually overstayed, and that expired. And what's funny is when I entered, you're young, you're 6 years old, you don't know that you're not supposed to stay. And you do have this notion of immigration, right? The word immigration kind of gets tossed around between adults and the circumstances that you are in until you're much older. So around middle school, maybe entering high school, once you start to notice your friends getting a driver's license permit, right? Then they start driving, then they start to get jobs at McDonald's or Burger King, and you're like, wait, I want to do those things too. And then that's when you start to realize, oh, wait, I can't. And this is why.
Mm-hmm.
And having to hide that aspect of your life was tricky.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
First of all, where were you born in Mexico?
Nogales, Sonora, which is right across Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you were super close to the US border.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And so when you come here at 6 years old, I'm assuming you already were speaking Spanish, obviously at home. Um,
Exactly. No English,
right.
nothing at all. I
And
vividly remember going to school the very first day and not knowing any English and sitting in class and hearing students around me speaking English. And I
wow,
was just like, I'm never going to get it. That
wow.
was so frustrating. I was like, how do I learn this language?
Hmm.
And I don't know, just one day it seemed to click, right? When you're a kid, I think you absorb a lot of things a lot faster than when we're adults.
Was there sort of like an ESL program, or was there anything for Spanish speaking kids? Because
Yes,
did you come into Texas or you came into Arizona?
Arizona. So
Arizona.
we lived in Tucson and I lived there until I was 16, 17.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely all of elementary, middle school, high school was in Arizona. But yeah, I guess the teachers figured out, oh, we should probably put this girl in ESL.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, I remember taking those classes and yeah, like I said, one day it seemed to click for me. So they took me out of ESL, put me into regular classes, and then, life was normal
Hmm.
in many ways.
So, like how? Okay, so you mentioned that like you realized that things were different, sort of when your friends started to get jobs and when they started to get. So until then, was it just? I guess I'm curious. Also, was this something that your parents were like, "Hey, don't tell your friends, like, don't talk to your teachers about this," or were you just go off to school like any other day?
Definitely when I started to realize what circumstances we were actually living,
Hmm.
my parents did have a conversation with us, meaning my sister and I, and said, "You don't talk about this with anyone. Uh, not your teachers, not your friends, not anyone."
Wow.
I still have best friends who don't know. Sorry.
I hope they're not watching. I'd be like, what?
Exactly. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what it was. We never spoke about it.
Hmm.
This is one of the first times that I actually share it.
Wow. Well, I'm honored. It's also one of those things where like I guess nowadays there's so much, there's hope around this, the Dream Act or some version of it, and it's just more out in the open. Maybe there's not as much of perhaps of a stigma as there was, 5, 6, 10 years ago. Maybe, I don't know.
That's really true because I remember during my high school years, even trying to apply for a scholarship or applying for college, no one understood why you didn't have a social security number.
Hmm.
And if you didn't have that, sorry, I can't help you. You don't belong here. Bring me that document and then we can talk about it. So what do? You don't come back. You don't
Right.
have anything.
Right.
So I think nowadays I would say yes, it's more mainstream. People who are going to college or, trying to apply for a scholarship, I think there's more understanding of DACAs and what that means. So yeah, it was definitely different back then.
Do you think you felt at any point, and I don't want to make this conversation all about that, but it is very much part of your story, right? And you
For
are
sure.
in the immigration industry in part because, it had some sort of an impact on you. Do you think there was ever a moment where you were like, because no one was sure what's going to happen, where people are still not sure what's going to happen, despite the fact that there's so much positivity around doing something for, for dreamers or, DACA recipients. Was there ever like a feeling of, okay, now that I realize the situation that we're in, and now that I realize that there are a lot of barriers, like, do I go back home? Well, maybe home is subjective too, but do I go back to Mexico? Do I am I just going to stay under the radar? I don't have a future. I don't know. Do those thoughts ever kind of cross your mind? Because we hear stories
100%.
about DACA recipients who have done such incredible things, but I suspect that many just kind of, they're not out there trying to be the face of this movement. They're just trying to fly low, but that really probably means you don't have a lot of opportunities. So I just was curious, did you ever have that feeling?
100%, especially if you have goals and aspirations and you are being constantly blocked. Definitely thought about, I need to move to Mexico. And the words saying I'm going to move back home were strange words for me because that was not home. Home was in the US, home was where my family was. And that feeling of not belonging in the US because you don't have a document versus also not feeling that you belong in the country that you were born in because you've never lived there. So, all the customs, culture are completely different. And it was scary to make that decision of I'm going to move to Mexico. I never made it, but definitely thought about it for sure.
It's funny because, so my family, we came here when I was 2.5 from what is now the Ukraine and back then was technically the Soviet Union. I don't remember it. So I was obviously younger than you were when you came here. But so I have zero memories of back home or back there where I was born. But I also it was a little bit different. We came here as refugees. So we had status coming, we technically didn't have a home from that perspective, but the U.S., was bringing all these folks in and we're giving folks refugee status, et cetera. But I also I can empathize with that because I feel like it's one of those things where you're definitely from here. I don't really have an accent usually. If anything, I have a New York accent sometimes, right? I don't really have a Russian accent. At the same time, I can't be the president, right? It's not like if you move, I feel like if you move when you're older, you're like, okay, I had a life here and now I have a life here and I'm a global citizen. When you grow up somewhere and you feel like that place 100% your home, but then there's some things are sorry, you can't because of XYZ. It's I feel like everything should be available, but it's not. And obviously it's different for me. Okay, I can't be the president and maybe a few other things. If you don't have a social security number, or a DACA situation, then you have so many other things that you can't get to. But generally speaking, it's just this idea of I don't know where I belong or what is home to me type of thing.
Exactly. And going back to your point earlier about being under DACA status, yes, it's amazing. It opened up doors. It gave me other possibilities that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have DACA. But I always was very aware that literally means deferred action, right? Which that to me, when I filed for DACA, I knew that I was coming out of the shadows, that I was going to be exposed, and I'm literally putting myself on a list where the possibility of being deported is there, right? It was not going to be a path to citizenship. And that decision alone is scary. This is why we still have, when we did have initial DACAs being filed. And you're still living a very uncertain life under the DACA status. So you still live somewhat, you lay low for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's so crazy. Did you eventually go to college? Were you able to finally get somewhere that was okay, cool, you're good?
I did some college, yes. But what's interesting, I could never apply for any sort of loan when I was under DACA status. You couldn't apply for a loan. At the time, I couldn't get any scholarships. They were offered. And then when the time came of exposing your status, even though it was DACA, it was sorry, we can't. You have to be a green card holder or a US citizen in order to be able to get this. So it made going to college very difficult because it was something I had to pay out of pocket. And at the same time, I was working at the law firm for an immigration law firm. So I really just put all of my focus in becoming really good at what I was working at.
That's awesome. I want to take a pause here. We have a couple of comments. So Marianne from San Francisco. Hi, Marianne. And Evelyn is from Buffalo. Evelyn just wrote here in another comment that there's a little bit of an echo going on. So for anybody who's watching or listening, can you just let me know in the comments if the audio is okay or not? I don't know what's going on today. It's like the internet gods are against me. So let me know if it's still bad or if it's okay for anybody who's watching or tuning into this live. I would appreciate it, just so we know here. So Yesica, I'm curious about, like, there's this idea of like, all right, I'm not gonna necessarily focus on, okay, the university thing is tough. You can't apply for loans. You can't, do any of that kind of stuff or easily. So then you say, okay, I'm going to focus 100% on the work that I have in front of me. I'm going to skill up. I'm going to, create a network for myself, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious, how did you fall into that sort of job? I mean, did you, I know I asked whether you had aspirations and like whether having, being a Daca recipient or having, being undocumented before Daca was around hindered you, but did you want to be in the legal space? Like, what did you want to do? And I guess, how did you then find your way into this immigration law firm?
Okay. It's kind of, well, no, it didn't start off with I wanted to be in law. My background's actually, I worked in the medical office, managing the office. And to me, the medical field was super interesting. Doctors were super interesting to me. And I'm like, maybe one day I can go to college and be a doctor. But while I maintained a job, I also did other things on the side because I always had this idea of being my own boss and creating, I don't know, my own hours, my own money, and possibly having, a business where you can employ people. That to me was always super fascinating. So I remember being really young, taking any babysitting job that I could because I liked the idea of making money. And also, I bought into a franchise, which didn't really go well. So I sold, didn't make any money. I sold it, didn't work out. Then I became an insurance agent. And then from there, I started like a subscription business for like major insurance carriers. So I've always had this idea of having a business. Well, when DACA happens, which was, what was it, August 2012,
Mm-hmm.
I applied as soon as we could. And then when I hired the attorney who helped me with my DACA application, I was so inspired by that attorney and the paralegal who helped me throughout the case process. I don't know, I was so moved by how they like treated me, how they like helped me, that they made me feel important and that my case was really important to them and the possibilities that this was going to bring. And from that day forward, I was like, I want to work in an immigration law firm. I know nothing about it. I know nothing about law, but I think I could be really good at it. So as soon as I got my DACA work permit, I remember looking for a job as an immigration paralegal. I saw the listing. I applied for the job. I went to the interview. Then they called me about like a week later and said, hey, congratulations, you got the job. And I was like, that's awesome. And then they're like, okay, could you send us your documentation? Like, I don't know, your green card, your birth certificate, whatever you have for the employment.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I send my work permit over, the attorney calls me and she's like, wait a minute, are you a DACA? And I was like, oh yeah, I am. And she continues, why didn't you say this at the interview? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to walk in saying, hey, I'm a DACA recipient. Can I get a job? So that was kind of a funny story for me.
Was that something that the lawyer was like, oh my God, we want you on board? Like, this is, it almost feels like it was a historic moment, honestly,
Right. And what's funny is they gave me the job. And then after they found out that I had a work permit, and then obviously the category indicated, oh, this girl is a DACA. And they were super excited about that. And they're like, this is amazing. We can't believe we're hiring a DACA. And so anyway, it was a lot
Wow.
of fun. Yeah. I mean,
I just,
she's still a friend of mine.
and I want to like, that's so amazing to me that something that was such a challenge for you in many ways, you know, for so much of your life, right? That like, and then you put a label on it and then that has its own stigma. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's
Totally.
bad. And I think it's so wonderful to like, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy where you then come into this space and that thing that held you back now makes you a freaking star. Like it's this thing where people are like, oh my God, this is amazing, rather than saying, wait a minute, I don't know. Right.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
just, I don't know. I find that sort of juxtaposition so cool that like, and also I gotta say that I appreciate the immigration industry very much. I mean, it's, you know, I don't practice law anymore, but I still, you know, immigration lawyers are just some of the best, most like empathetic people. And it's not just people who work with, you know, on asylum cases. Anybody, you work with investors, you work with, you know, professionals. Like you're changing people's lives one way or another by helping them move, let's say, to the U.S. or anywhere in the world if you're an immigration attorney or professional. And I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's such a wonderful moment that they were like, you know, that maybe you felt not just seen but like appreciated for this status.
Exactly. That's so true. Those are the words that came to mind. Like I was being seen and heard, and it wasn't a negative thing in my life. So that welcoming was really awesome. And also them taking me on with zero experience in the field. I mean, looking back, I'm like, they were crazy. Do you know how complicated this is? Doing case prep is not easy. There's so much complexity in immigration, and the fact that they gave me a shot, I was like, I will always be very grateful for it.
So how did you start to learn about how to be a paralegal? And I mean, you obviously went through your own case, but you know, that's not enough to
Right.
sort of help with a lot of different case types
No.
usually. So how did you do
Mhm.
that?
So initially, the paralegal that was working there, she was the one who trained me. Um, like 3 months in, they leave me in the sense that this attorney opens another location. So she had two offices in two different cities. So I was managing one office, and then the other paralegal moved to the
Wow.
other city to manage the other. So I had to really, really work hard and do my own research after work about immigration cases, instructions about the forms to really become a professional in it. And it was really important to me because as a DACA, I felt like I needed to prove myself, right? I needed to go the extra mile.
Hmm.
And it's always been a part of my personality to begin with. But in this industry and immigration, you are dealing with people's lives. It's a big deal, right? So I did a lot of my own research. I would look at previous cases that were filed and I would study them and I would be like, okay. And I started to form patterns in my head of like, okay, this case type means this and this. And we need to have all those pieces put together. And becoming really, really efficient was highly important because here we have a solo attorney with two offices with their own caseloads. So when she would come into the office, things needed to be completed. You
Hmm.
know, it was a matter of she shows up, there's a case completely prepared, ready to file on her desk for her to review, where all she said was, okay, it's ready. Have the client come in and sign with me, and then we file it.
Hmm.
So I don't know, it just the need was there for me to be highly efficient and become a professional in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it's also one of those things where when you see the client come in and how important it is to them, it kind of motivates you to want to go there. It's not like, oh man, I have to go do this extra, you know, research or work. It's like, no, I want to make sure that I don't mess up because like you said, you're dealing with people's lives. So wow. So
Exactly.
3 months in, they were like, let's do it.
Yes,
We're leaving you in the trenches. So
pretty much.
how long did you work at that firm for?
Oh, like 7 years?
Wow. Okay. So you really kind of, you know, you learned there and you grew there. Um,
Exactly.
Now I'm curious, where does the technology side of things step in? You know, was the firm, because I know, you know, I could tell already by, you know, how you're describing it that your brain works in a very kind of process oriented way, and you want to sort of, you start to see patterns right away, whether it's case type or fact patterns, or like how to do the case, right? Patterns of first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to put it together, then I'll do that other thing. I don't know, was technology part of sort of your life in general, or was it part of the law firm's practice?
Not really, which made things very difficult because it's hard to be efficient and carry on a process with not that much technology. We were using, I don't know, like 6, 7 different tools to be able to make things work. And there was so much data entry just in every single tool that we were using. It was very time consuming. And I think going through that experience and thinking as a paralegal, working in the office, managing it, wearing all these hats, uh, that's kind of where our tech stems from. What was it that I needed to be a really good paralegal, and also keeping that communication with the attorney when we were not physically together?
Yeah. You still hear that. I mean, there's a lot of talk about APIs in the immigration industry, and it's slowly moving in that direction. But there are still a lot of firms that use many, many tools. I mean, I'm guilty of that, right? Laborless is a tool that we now integrate with one platform, at least docket wise. But in general, if folks want to use us, it still is sort of another standalone tool. And so on the one hand, all these tools are great. They're automating or streamlining something. On the other hand, when you have to balance so many different platforms, maybe there's double data entry, et cetera. It's definitely kind of can be a pain.
Definitely.
So I'm curious, so you were there for over 7 years. What was sort of the next step? Like, when did you start to think, okay, I want it to be, I've worked for myself when I was younger. I've learned a lot here. Like, what was that thing that allowed you to say, I'm going to go try something on my own? Whatever, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something.
Yeah, and at the time I didn't know. I actually got married, became pregnant, and when I went on my maternity leave, that's when I started to work for the same firm in a remote setting. And that came with its own challenges, right? There was no tech involved, so it made things difficult. It was me, traveling to Portland and carrying those physical files to my home, or mailing physical documents back to the firm. And to me, I'm like, this is not efficient. There's has to be some other way. So the need to facilitate my pain points, that's it's kind of twofold. One, I'm like, why isn't there a platform or software to help me do my job? But also, as after I had baby, I had the time to sit and think about, okay, what are the processes that I need to set in place in order to facilitate my job remotely? And initially, my thought process was, hey, maybe what I should do is do some sort of training manual for paralegals. Simply because when I worked at the firm, we went through, losing staff, hiring staff. And that alone is a huge pain point for law firms. You're so busy in what you're doing that the attorney typically does not have the time to train new staff. It's usually staff training staff, right? And even that is super detrimental for the process flow, because you as a paralegal who has a caseload has to stop everything that you're doing so that you can train the new person. So that's kind of where Tila started, where I wanted to create this training manual. And then it kind of morphed into, well, what if we put into a system? And then it turned into, well, I think we need software. And then venturing out into, what does that look like? What does that even mean? What is a full stack developer? There's a lot of knowledge in that aspect that I had no idea about.
I think that's a really cool kind of progression, because the first thing that you did, and this is such a great way to build software in general, especially kind of, business based software. The first thing you did, you had an idea, of course, or you had a process. You documented that process. You made some sort of like a sheet or a pen, whatever it was, right? And I'm assuming a lot of folks, they have that. Maybe it's their standard procedures or the procedure manual or whatever it is. So to your point, when you hire someone new, You don't have to sit there you say, here, take this, study it, and then you're going to be kind of good to go, maybe 65%. And then the rest of it, you'll learn sort of as you go.
Right.
It's a huge efficiency. But that document in and of itself is basically kind of like business requirements for potential software, right? So it's cool that you made that bridge. You connected that and said, okay, this is something that is a system. Can we systematize it with tech? Now, my question for you here is, and I want to give context to this question because the whole point of the show for me, at least in the beginning, was when I was starting my company, and I suppose it's probably the same for you when you were first starting Tila, like I had no one to look to for kind of immigration tech advice or best practices or tips. Yet at the same time, there were already so many of these awesome tech founders who've built technology based on their own ideas, right, for the immigration space. So my hope is that, at least in part, people who watch or listen to this, if they have their own ideas for building technology around immigration or really anything within global mobility, they'll know that other people have done it. And so, it's not this weird little niche. It is actually a much needed industry that needs disruption. And then two, so that they can get tips and sort of ideas on how to do it. So that's the context. So my question is, when you first said, all right, I have this process and procedure, I think I should turn it into, or let's see what we can do with technology. Where do you go first? Was it like Excel? Like how do you start before you decided, let's build something of our own? What was that first step that you took to like potentially test out if it could be a, solution of its own?
Well, first we built out what I know is called now a deck, right? And literally we used PowerPoint, where we drew out, we meaning my husband and I, who's a huge supporter of Tila. And he was sitting at the computer using PowerPoint, and I'm like, okay, we need a button here, and that button needs to have these set of actions. And then if someone chooses this case type, we need these set of defaults to happen. And we kind of drew it out that way on PowerPoint. From there, we began calling different companies of like that, label themselves as we create software or we can create, whatever. And we did a lot of interviews for a good 3 months, I would say, just calling and kind of pitching our idea of what we wanted. Many of them didn't understand what we were trying to do. The fact that it was immigration, they didn't get it. They didn't understand how that would be helpful for immigration, or it was too foreign for them. So no one really wanted to get into helping us develop this idea. And finally, one person did, and he was like, oh, this is awesome. What you're doing is really great. We believe in what you're doing. And so that helps, right? First, finding someone who believes in what you're doing and who has heart for immigration, for immigrants. And I think that's what really helped us out. So when we engaged in communication with our tech manager, he basically really took us in and sat down with us and said, okay, what is it that you need? And we had many conversations back and forth of like, what is our vision? What are we trying to accomplish? And that's kind of how it all started. Before finding him, I will say it was really difficult because there was no one to ask about how do you find someone, what's the terminology that you're supposed to use? That's really difficult to find. And like you said, yeah, there are other companies with tech, but they seemed unreachable to me. I'm like, no, you call a company and you want to talk to the CEO, that's typically not going to happen.
Right. That's when I'm curious, it's funny you talk about this. I listen to a lot of shows about, entrepreneurs that build things and start companies. It almost sounds like whenever I listen to a company or listen to a show or an interview with a CEO who's starting maybe a consumer products company where they need a factory to make something, or maybe they are starting like a food company and they need a co-packer or facility. And, the question is always like, how did you get started? And they're like, we called 1,000 factories and we told them our idea and we were small, so we had to start with a small batch. And most people are like, yeah, I'm not interested, or that's too small for me. They're like, until I found that one factory that was really interested in what we had to make and like agreed to take us, on or to take our small order. It's really interesting that this is kind of the same idea. If you're looking around for, maybe a development shop or even a CTO or whatever it is to build out the software, it's not just like, here's money and giving my software. You really have to find someone who believes in your vision and like thinks it's interesting and is willing, it's a risk for them too. If they take your business now and they turn someone else down, and then 4 weeks later, there's no more Yesica and there's no more Tila. Well, now they just lost both your business and that other business they turned down. And so it's interesting to think about this. You have to like really find a partner, whether or not they're a full official partner or like even an outsourced,
Exactly, like a per project.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I would say that it's really important because when you dive into building a software and you don't know anything and you begin to develop, right, the wireframe, you need someone who is willing to pivot with you as you are developing. Because as you're developing, you start to see things that you are like, oh, I missed this. Or, we have a broken link here. We need to go back a little bit. So having that person that's willing to pivot with you, it's super important.
That's such a great takeaway. One other question that I had is when you were, and you share however much or how little you want, but I'm just curious, were you self-funding this at the time, or were you telling this company like, hey, help us develop this and then we'll pay you 6 months down the road? Like, practically speaking, again, if someone has an idea and they're like, I don't have $200,000 to build a tool, like how did you get that started? And maybe how do you think other people can do the same?
Self-funded to this day. It's not easy. You better believe that what you're doing is good because we put in our savings. Also, partly a little bit the business that I had for big insurance carriers, that we saved that money, and that obviously helped fund the initial, process of developing our software. So yes, it's been, when you first start, it's going to be a lot of money going out. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then it continues. And then of course, once you start building clientele, it starts to get a little bit easier, but yeah, no, that's cool. I want to just take a quick pause here. We had a lot of great comments. So Evelyn is from Buffalo. I think I already did put that up. Ian Hawes says, thank you for sharing the story. And it highlights the importance of Daca now more than ever. So yeah, and awesome story. And then Evelyn said, because we were talking, this is before when you were mentioning how, they made you feel really welcome and comfortable, the law firm. Mandy says, really enjoying this episode. Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate you watching. Damian Wilson says, process workflow tools make life so much better. I totally agree. I make a priority participating in at least one workflow demo training per month. That's interesting, right? If you keep your process workflow skills sharp, actually, you can probably continue to iterate in that fashion too, where like you can then step back and say, okay, let's look at our product now. Can we add anything to it?
100%. Yeah.
Damien says, Tila sounds awesome and Yesica rocks.
Thanks.
And then Evelyn says here, I was told it was impossible. This is about sort of starting your own company. But we don't have freelance paralegals, especially in immigration and in Buffalo. So Evelyn, there you go. There's your business opportunity right there. So thank you all for your comments. Keep them coming. If you have questions for Yesica specifically, please let us know, drop them in the comments. And of course, and also if you're enjoying this, hit the like button. I never ask for that, but if you're enjoying this, like it, love it, support it, whatever you want to give us little light bulb.
What is it? Tag, subscribe.
Yeah. Subscribe below. So you got this developer, and they're doing, they're building this out. They're building, I guess, your first iteration or your MVP, I guess, if you want to call it that. You're probably learning the lingo throughout this process, right? Which is like the best 100%. Way to learn is as you're going, and your developer's like, I need this, and you're like, what is that? exactly? And you're like,
Exactly.
oh, right. Okay. So what were those kind of first steps? When did you feel confident that this was something that you were ready to use? And I guess, were you already working for yourself then and taking on cases, like, because you're building a service and a tech at the same time? How did you manage that sort of parallel growth?
I should have started with an MVP. Everyone out there, start with that. I think partly I'm kind of a perfectionist. I knew exactly what I wanted. So I always pushed the envelope of what an MVP should be. And I was like, I can't go out there and tell everyone about Tila and take on cases and take on clients when I don't have like a really good functioning software. I just felt too much responsibility by giving a very basic software, because to me, the software was going to help us internally, right? Have a process, put out a good quality of work in our case preps, but also having that connection and transparency with the attorney that we were working with. And that's the whole premise of the software. We wanted it to be something where the firm can communicate with the paralegal and also the client, and that the firm knows exactly what's happening throughout the life of the case as we're preparing it. We're just think like notes or messages between us and the client. I wanted that to be visible for the firm. So I had a lot of requests in the beginning because I really wanted it to be right. And we worked on it for a long time because I wasn't ready to launch and say, hey, we are ready. And yeah, I guess there wasn't really an MVP. I just went for it 100%. I didn't say, hey, let's test this out, or hey, I'm starting this business. I didn't do that. I just went all in.
So like when you felt you were ready, you opened your doors, I guess, right? So
Mm-hmm.
before that, did you already have some clients that you were working with as a freelance pair, or were you still at the firm that you were at?
Uh, so when I went on maternity leave, I was working remotely for the firm.
Right.
And then I basically stopped working for the firm altogether and I focused on the software part
Mm-hmm.
of the business because that was taking a lot of effort and time. It was like I was learning immigration all over again, but
Right.
in the in the tech side of things.
And so the first client was, did you go back to the law firm and you were like,
Yeah.
listen, I'm going to be on my, so you were actually, your first client was kind of your, older employer
Yeah,
that,
my previous employer,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
who we're really good friends to this day, and she's super supportive of all of my business ventures that I did while working with her. She was super supportive about all of them. And especially when I told her, hey, I'm going to build this. So I actually went to her and the attorneys who helped me on my case for Daca. I went to both of them and I said, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? Would you use it? That's as far as MVP went.
Right.
And and I got really positive feedback from them. And they're like, yeah, totally. Paralegals are needed, especially when you're in between hires or someone went on maternity leave, or or you're want to scale your business but you don't want to hire more in-house paralegals. So I was like, awesome, I'm doing this, and I just went for it.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I'm curious, how did you get so did both of them actually start working with you when you first started,
Yeah.
or like, and then built based on top of that, did you start doing like basically sales and reaching out to other firms and saying, hey, here's what I can offer you?
Yes, I just started reaching out via email or phone calls. And honestly, LinkedIn has been really awesome, even though I'm not super savvy with LinkedIn and
Not
I
yet.
don't post as much. um, yeah, I've been able to connect with a lot of really cool immigration attorneys via LinkedIn, and they reached out, and it's been awesome. It's been a really, really cool experience actually since we launched the business. I've had awesome relationships with our current clients, and they're all solo practitioners. Most of them are women, which is really cool. I love that. And yeah, it's so funny working with all of these attorneys that we have now. It goes past just doing case prep for them. I think coming with knowledge of managing a firm has been really cool to help,
Mm.
especially new solo practitioners in practice, how to set processes for their firms. So I've been able to share that with them. So it's kind of, me paying back for someone taking me on with zero experience.
Yeah, no, that's it's really inspiring. And I was actually curious. Well, first of all, when did Tila launch?
Oh, I think it was 4 months ago now.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So we're newbies.
Very newbies. That's great. So there's a lot of opportunities
Total
for you
startup.
And you can come back on this show down the road as we hit milestones and things like that. That's amazing. And what do you do? One question that came up for me is, do your law firm clients that you work with, Solo's still a law firm, do they typically have their own sort of case management system they're using already? Or do they just hang up a shingle, they're doing everything sort of ad hoc, and then they get a couple extra cases and they want to take them, so they go to you to help augment their staff, if you will? How do you deal with people who may or may not have other platforms that they're using?
Actually, all of our clients right now have a case management software in place.
Okay.
And there hasn't been any friction or any sort of issues with us doing their case prep through our own system, because they have full access to forms and all of this. So all they're doing is, since when we prepare that case packet, it literally, all you have to do is push print. You got everything you need to go ahead and file it. So for them, what they're doing and the way they're managing it is just uploading it onto their case management software, just to have a copy of it.
Got it. Okay. And so, because I know you talked about data entry, so then the way that it would work is when they get that new case, they would, I guess, log into your platform, and then do you help collect info? I guess this is my way of asking, how does it work? So if I'm a law firm and I'm like, I need your help, this is exactly what I'm looking for, how would I work with you, with Tila?
Definitely. Well, we have a portal, as you already mentioned. The account is completely free for the firm. You are able, so you come in, your client retained with you, you want us to work on the case, you log into your account, you create a client file, you add a case to it, you specify the case type that you want us to do. Could be, I don't know, AOS, spousal 245A. And then that tells us, okay, we know exactly what forms we need to prepare. That tells us what documentation we need. And once you submit that case to us, you are assigned one paralegal for that case. And typically the process goes, we will contact the attorney, kind of discuss the case for 10, 15 minutes, so we're all on the same page about the case. And then we engage in communication with the client. And yeah, we're responsible for getting the documents we need, getting the questionnaires filled out so that we can do the forms, and then preparing the entire case packet, cover letter forms, documents.
And so that's cool. So that means that the lawyer has to really trust, because I'm assuming you and your team are talking to the foreign national,
Intending
right?
immigrants,
yeah. So that means they have to talk to you and trust you to have good client relationship skills and to be respectful and to get the right information and all that. So it really feels like once they work with you, it's like, yeah, you're just a paralegal in their office that they know that once they get on the phone with the intending immigrant or whatever it is that they're filing for, they're like, yeah, they've got it. I trust them. I don't have to hover over and make sure or whatnot,
exactly.
which is really powerful. I mean, both for you, because it means that you can use your skill to its fullest and not have someone hanging over your head. And of course for the client, right? Because they know that they can trust that you'll do a good job. How do you, I guess, impart that trust on people, or how do you find the right clients where you have that relationship that's so strong?
Honestly, I think it's like you said before, the fact that we all have this common goal and is to help that individual or that family. That's where it all begins. And thankfully, I don't know, it's been really awesome that they are trusting of our services, right? And that we will do the right thing for them and represent them properly. And I don't know, establishing that relationship, having a couple conversations before we even start on a case is really, really important. I also like to understand each firm, although there's so many patterns that are the same, each firm has their own signature. And understanding that is crucial to us being successful with them. So I think that's really important, having those initial conversations. So I love that initial conversation because I get to know their style. I get to know, what's the process flow that they have and where do we fit in for them, and then explaining all that.
I mean, the other cool thing that you mentioned before is, you have many years of experience. I know you're just looking at your website. Your other staff members and the paralegals have experience. So in a way, especially if you're working with a young attorney or a newer attorney, I should say, you may have actually more experience than they do with some case types, in which case the synergy really kind of works both ways. So
I know. I love that because I can share that knowledge with a new attorney. Working at the law firm, when I was with them, we hired a new attorney just fresh out of law school, and I had to train her. And it was interesting. You really have to start from zero, right? You need to train that attorney what a paralegal does. So then like you gain some knowledge of that case prep process.
mhm.
And it's been cool because I'm able to touch more people having this business. And I'm able to teach them about case types that they want to take on, but don't feel comfortable doing because they've never done it before.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, we have a process in place. You can totally do that case type. This is what you need. And it's been really awesome to share that knowledge.
That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was getting started at my firm, I mean, I had interned in immigration basically in all of law school. So I had a pretty broad understanding and a couple of specifics, but man, the senior paralegals there just schooled me on everything. They were amazing. They prepared everything perfectly. They gave me feedback when I was giving them stuff. It was just like, I mean, they helped me become a better attorney far and away more than anybody else, which was really, really awesome. I talked to some of them today still, which is great.
I know, it's so awesome, the relationships you build with attorneys. Like you become friends.
Yeah. Well, you need each other. It's a
Yes.
symbiotic relationship. Um, just a couple of comments here. So Janet Turner, the dreads are back. She's talking about
Yes.
she's talking about the plant over my head. Love watching your community. Happy Friday. Thank you, Janet. Happy Friday to you too. And Evelyn asks, are you looking for paralegals to join? So that's actually it's actually a great question here.
Yes,
You know,
actually.
yeah. How do okay? So yeah. So how like what do right now? So Tila's new. You provide immigration paralegal services where you really work very closely with the firm, and then of course the intending immigrant, and then you have the software at the same time. So what's the plan? I know it's new, so like you're probably just trying to wrap your head around what's happening. But is there room? Are you hiring? Are you looking for more growth and more clients? Like when we get off this call, what's the next thing that you're going to go back and do for Tila?
Reach out, do cases, and talk to my paralegals, get back into business. Yes, definitely. We want to grow. We want to grow, by taking on more firms. We want to grow by hiring more paralegals. And honestly, for us, the future of Tila means being a reliable resource for the immigration community. You know, um, Again, going back to the firm that I worked at, I remember losing our staff at the second office we had and trying to manage two locations with just myself, with no support. That was really hard. I wish there would have been a company like mine that I could have told my attorney, we're swamped. Things are going to fall through the cracks if we don't have a paralegal stat to help us with this caseload. So I think to me that's super important. The fact that I can do that for an attorney who's going through hard times, that to me is amazing.
Where does the name Tila come from?
It stands for the immigration legal assistant.
Ah, very cool. I love it. That's so cool. I was wondering if it was like a word in Spanish that I hadn't
No,
know before.
I should have.
Maybe there's something also there subconsciously.
Right.
That's cool. The immigration legal assistant. Uh, that's cool. And from the technology standpoint, because I do love to talk about the tech side of things. Obviously, like you said, there's no friction. Your clients have, existing case management platforms that, of course, they're using, and they use yours along with you. do you have a vision for sort of what direction that's going to go in? Like, are you thinking maybe you could integrate so they can pull information from you, from your platform into others? Like, what are some of the thoughts that you have around the tech side of things?
Totally. I think in regards to immigration specifically, you have those possibilities of integrating with other companies because we all have the common goal. And 100%, I would love to integrate with other case management softwares because it would only benefit their users, and they're our clients, and we're working on cases. And I think having that I don't know, the way I picture is having this big ecosystem in immigration because you really do need all of these pieces to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having that ability to integrate with other companies is going to be life-changing for attorneys, clients, and clients are getting way more tech savvy than they were 10 years ago when I started in immigration. It's crazy.
Right. And so it's not challenging to like send them a link and say, upload this, take a picture of that. Like they get it,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they
Yep.
have smartphones. Obviously not every client maybe has a smartphone or access to, let's say, the internet, but to your point, more and more people do have that. I'm curious, do you work mostly on family immigration cases, or do you do business immigration, or sort of what's the range of services?
So right now we specialize in family-based immigration. I'm hoping by the end of the year we can start offering the business because I've had a lot of inquiries from business attorneys, which I'm like, I really want to help you, but hold on.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, frankly, look, the immigration space is growing. If there's a reform for DACA recipients, and especially if there's some kind of status or future status for the 11 plus million undocumented folks still in the U.S. that aren't qualified, let's say, for or eligible rather for DACA. I mean, that's massive. That's like, because it's not like you're going to flip a switch and it's like, okay, 11 million applications. It's not 11 million applications. There's probably going to be one initial application, then a renewal, and then you have to file for it. Like, there's just always so many things, so many steps along the way. And of course, it's really good to have legal support along that journey. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that. So, fingers crossed,
Yeah.
of course, for something like that happening.
I know. Reform would be amazing.
Yeah. Question for you around, or I guess one of the last questions, I suppose, is number one, where can people find you? So how do people find you online, website, et cetera?
TilaCasePrep.com or LinkedIn, which I don't even know my handle, you guys. It's probably my name, Yesica Sierra.
Yeah.
Or through Roman.
Yeah. The nice thing about LinkedIn is you could just they could type in your name and they'll find you.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. And, and I guess in that way, whether it's a law firm that wants to work with you, or if it's somebody who's interested maybe in joining the team to some capacity, I guess they could reach out to you through there.
Totally.
Awesome.
I'd love to hear from you guys.
I'm curious, oh, nice.
Sorry, I just touched a button on my standing desk.
Your standing desk. Those are great.
We'll leave that alone.
No, that's I need to get a standing desk myself, actually.
It's so helpful.
I'm curious, just like if I can ask kind of one specific question that I really kind of am like to ask nowadays is, there's obviously this upward trajectory, and you're just launched, and so things are still kind of really forming. But do you have any memorable challenges, I guess, that you overcame? In part because usually we learn the best from somebody's challenges than from just their successes over and over. And now obviously I'm sure it was difficult throughout, but I don't know, anything stands out that you kind of remember that time and maybe you learned something really fundamental or important?
Honestly, for me, the biggest obstacle was the tech side of it, because I'm not a tech founder. And when we first launched, there were some hiccups that happened. And to me, that was like devastating, right? I'm like, oh no, people are going to think like, oh, if their system doesn't work, like their case prep is going to suck. So that to me was the biggest challenge, and trying to really hone down the processes so that there wasn't anything breaking.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that was the most memorable for me.
Just it's also a good reminder that things aren't going to be perfect. And, if you're a self-proclaimed perfectionist from, you just mentioned that, but it's still, there's something's going to go wrong. And like, that's okay.
It's so true. Yeah.
And most of the time clients are understanding, I mean, lawyers make mistakes too, right? Like, hopefully they're not devastating mistakes, but maybe there's a typo somewhere and you could fix it and things like that. And I think we're all human, and it's okay to not beat yourself up over kind of, maybe small hiccups along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, so one last question that I'd like to ask, I usually try to end something, end on a kind of a fun note. Well, number one, have you been able to, because you're an American citizen, congratulations on that, of course, since through marriage, right? Because you got married back in the day, which is amazing. Have you been able to go back to Mexico since you became a citizen?
Can you believe it? I have not. I've been so busy trying to build that it's just, I'm like later, and I just keep pushing it. It's been one of my dreams to go back and travel to other places. I've always wanted to travel, so that's definitely in the future, but I'm still focusing on Tila.
Of course. Well, I hope you can go back to maybe to your hometown, and then you can have, once Tila becomes huge, you can go and open up some sort of, maybe your second office. Maybe you can have, how cool would that be if you went and opened up, like the Mexico office in your hometown?
That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be a really wonderful story. So then do you have any travel plans? What's your first place you want to go to travel then when things open back up?
Definitely Mexico.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Boom. You heard it here, folks. Well, Yesica, thank you so much. This was awesome. I probably could have a million more questions, but I'm excited for, the congrats again on the launch and everything, all the growth so far. I'm excited for where the company's going to go, and actually would love, especially since you're so early on, I think to me that's super exciting, because let's see how things grow and change and shift over 6 months, a year. And then I'd love to have you back on to give us all an update at some point in the future. I'm sure everyone would love to hear it, and hopefully there will be some good, exciting news then.
Sure.
So yeah. So thank you, Yesica. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for so many comments, so much back and forth, which I really appreciate. Thank you all so much. What a freaking phenomenal episode and an inspiring story. So I saw a question here about the website. So it's tilacaseprep.com. That's the website. If you're checking this out, especially on Facebook or YouTube, the links are in the description. On LinkedIn, there's just no space, unfortunately, with the character limit. But yeah, check out Yesica's page and the company's website. Of course, reach out to her if you have any questions. And thank you all for being here. Next week, join me for another amazing conversation. And then I'm going to be taking 2 weeks off. Funny enough, I'm going to Mexico at the end of the month. So, I guess I'll be there before Yesica, and we'll talk about it. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Have a wonderful weekend, and peace out.